This is our drive in which we want to open up the possibilities for our students to learn beyond the classroom, because we believe that classroom, a given curriculum, is not all that these youngsters need, especially for the positive future.
Pakistan has 110 million youth. These people can be turned into a tremendous asset if the government and the political people who are currently in power or will be in power in the future recognize the contribution the youth can make.
We are committed to bringing rational, evidence-based policy making in Pakistan. That is our first area of focus. We want institutions to work on sustainable paradigm.
We need to expand our export capacity and in turn the exports. We need to increase our domestic output. Also, that is going to generate employment. Now, coupling all of these together, what we are going to get is the economic growth.
Don't be negative. Look at it positive. I said, do you realize that there are 51 Muslim countries in the world? Of these 51, there are just 3 that are moving towards some kind of representative democracy: Pakistan, Malaysia, and Indonesia.
Pakistan's situation is such that we are earning less and spending more. And we have to raise the tax collection so that, and we have to reduce our spending.
Empowering women through giving them voice and vote. That shall be very interesting.
The youth of the country, some political development, the location of the country, and the fact that if we change the culture of this country and make people think positive, we have a great future ahead of us.
We create that environment where women had equal opportunity for their economic contribution, for their social, cultural, all kinds of contributions. And we are very, very proud that only a year ago we set up Women Development Center. And not a day goes by when we don't have very hands-on training, workshop, discussion in which we are empowering our women.
State of the economy frontline stakeholder rating that gender development report. For opening remarks, I invite Mr. Shahid, Vice Chairman of Shahid Javed Burki Institute of Public Policy.
Asghar Zaidi, Vice Chancellor, Government College University, Lahore, Chairman Shahid Javed Burki, members of the faculty and the students. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you all to the launch ceremony of our 15th annual report, State of the Economy, Frontline Stakeholder Reaping the Gender Dividend. This is the title of the report that we are going to introduce. To start with, I must thank you all for having come and participated in this launch ceremony for 2 reasons. One, that there is no appetite for research in this country. Your presence here, both of the faculty and the students, is a tremendous source of encouragement and inspiration for us. It speaks of your commitment and the commitment of the university to develop a very strong, much needed linkage between research and education, and secondly, to promote evidence-based policy making in Pakistan. And I'm indeed grateful for that. I'm also grateful to you that you have made it possible for us to bring in this room, under the same roof, those who shape, chisel, and groom the future generations and leadership. And at the same time, We are very fortunate to have you, the students here, who represents the youthful exuberance of this country and who are going to determine the future destiny of this country. And no matter whatever the impression or the people or the world says, I am a strong believer that Pakistan is going to survive. And because of you and the aspirations that you have, your economic, political, and social aspirations, we will be able to become very soon in the near future one of the greatest countries in the world. You may take it as rhetoric or a kind of passionate outburst of, a haggard old man, but I do believe in that. And I believe and I know that, inshallah, because of your creativity, your survivability, your resilience, and your commitment to Pakistan, this country is going to remain on the map of the world as one of the leading nations. Before I am carried away by my passions, let me introduce you a little bit, Shahid Javed Burki Institute. I'll not dwell on the report in detail because my colleague Ayman Adnan is going to give you the recommendations embodied in the report. But let me say a few words about the Shahid Javed Burki Institute. Our chairman, Mr. Shahid Javed Burki, who is a world-renowned economist, he has contributed and his family have contributed financially and intellectually in sustaining this institute. We have three major areas of focus. One is to reduce rationality deficit in the policy process. When I joined the civil service back in 1974, unfortunately, this country was confronted with what I call the institutional and policy fragmentation. When I came back and retired in 2013, that fragmentation of the policy as well as institutions was very much there. So Mr. Shahid Javed Burki, along with Mr. Sartaj Aziz, envisioned an institution which would become a center of excellence in public policy. So we are committed to bringing rational, evidence-based policy making in Pakistan. That is our first area of focus. The second is that we want institutions to work on sustainable paradigm so that the individual whims and the caprices and the directives of the president and the governor, which somehow determine the development destiny of this country, these are thrown out of the window and instead the institutions work on a sustainable paradigm and provide techno-professional input to the policy and planning process. And the third is developing the leadership at all levels. And recently, Mr. Shahid Javed Burki has very generously launched a Shahid Javed Burki Shahid Javed Burki scholarship program. We are awarding about 76 scholarships this year. Hopefully, in due course, we will expand the scholarships with more donors and more funds coming after establishing the validity of the scholarship program. And this scholarship, again, is devoted to, I'll very briefly refer to this report now, empowering the women. These scholarships are for the female candidates who belong to not well-to-do families of Pakistan and who have a certain income bracket, which I'll not mention, but again, it is a merit plus need-based scholarship devoted to enabling the girls to pursue their career aspirations and achieve whatever they want to achieve. And the one distinctive feature of this scholarship program is that after qualifying or after receiving or after benefiting from this scholarship, they should be able to give back to the society for something which someone else has given to them. So this is the spirit that we are going to inculcate, and which is an integral part of the scholarship program. I'll finish here by just stating two facts, and I think which is a food for thought for all of us, and we need to ponder, reflect, and really think what a predicament that we, the land of pure, the Pakistanis, the way we have treated the women in this country. The 2022 Gender Gap Index reveals, 2022, last year, that is the latest one, that on the Gender Deficit Index, we are one of the countries which figures at the bottom. The only country which is behind is Afghanistan. And you will be amazed to know, out of 146, we are 145. This is a reality. This is based on the statistics which the government provided and the criteria that has been agreed internationally. So you can imagine the way that we have been dealing with the population which has so much of creativity, so much of talent, so much of energy, and if they unleash their potential and their talent and their energy, you can imagine what we can do, but we have not been able to do that. On education attainment, we are 137 out of 146 countries. On health and survival, we are 143 out of 146 countries. These are the kind of statistics which I want to leave with you to think, to ponder, and I believe for you, the young students, the male and the females, that how we can create an conducive atmosphere or an environment where women exercise their right. Their right is given a dignity. We protect their right, and we create an environment so that they could exercise their right and exercise their economic, political, social, and cultural choices freely. Thank you very much indeed.
For highlighting the situation of gender in Pakistan with reference to the world, I would like to add few things. In 2010, at Lahore Chamber of Commerce, we did some research, and at that time, out of more than 50% population of Pakistan were female population, and still it is there. And out of this 50%, only 11% were towards economic activity of Pakistan, contributing towards economic activity of Pakistan. And now it is raised from 11 to 23%, which is a good sign. It is improving, but still we need more. But towards business activity, if we talk about business women, that is a strange situation that it is less than 1% still. In business activity, at least 10 to 12% contribution from female sector is required so that Pakistan can progress further. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Eman Adnan to highlight key policy issues and recommendation of Shahid Javed Burki Institute of Public Policy's 15th Annual Report. Ms. Eman Adnan.
Thank you very much, sir, for inviting me here. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here to grace this occasion and to hear our presentation. Much is in the offing, so please bear with me. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this year, we came up with our 15th annual report on gender. As Mr. Shahid Najam has already mentioned, that we are a public policy institute which works on policy areas that deals with sustainable development paradigm, and dealing with gender development and equality is one of those areas that cannot be ignored. That is why it created an interest for us to research on this area. The state of the economy, frontline stakeholders reaping the gender dividend is the area of research this year. And we wanted to pay homage to women through our research, this annual report, in terms of how they have created a space for themselves, what kind of space has been created, if there has been, and what needs to be done to create more space, more empowerment, more equality, and a more equitable society in Pakistan. The presentation would entail this sequence. We'll start with the theme that we've already done. I'll introduce you the authors, the contributors of this annual report, and then I would progress towards the summary and some recommendations that we have given in this report. So let me also introduce you some of the key areas that we have identified within this research report. We would be talking about the fundamental rights that women should be given and how far have we come in achieving them. We would also be talking about the gender deficit implications. We'll be having a comparative analysis of different social sectors. We would be discussing the role of women in development and technology, how technology has helped women to develop, and consequently, how has that developed the economy of various countries, for example, China. The importance of women in combating climate change is also important, and we shall be looking into that as well. The contribution of women in agriculture and livestock, something that cannot be ignored, considering Pakistan is basically an agrarian economy. Women's role in China's development, and we would also be talking about something very, very important this time, in this report, empowering women through giving them voice and vote. That shall be very interesting. Also, let me now introduce the authors. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been blessed at BIP, Burki Institute of Public Policy, that people who have contributed in this report are seasoned technocrats, bureaucrats, policy and development practitioners. We have Mr. Burki himself, who has written in this report. We have Shahid Najam Sahab, we have Babar Yaqoob Sahab, we have some policy practitioners and development practitioners from the UN and the World Bank as well. We have a very renowned economist, Mr. Farooq Iqbal, writing for us as well on the economic situation of Pakistan. Then there are 2 to 3 ambassadors who have written for us, and some of the members of board of directors of BIP as well. So this time, what we have identified is that Pakistan, as we all know, Pakistan is going through difficult economic times. The inflation is soaring. It is affecting all of us. The economic growth is on the plunge. The current account and balance of payment is in deficits. So we don't really have a very rosy picture to paint. Our economist, as I've said, Dr. Farooq Iqbal, he suggests in his write-up that claiming to have and also practicing austerity measures is a very, very insignificant, short-term, and a very superficial level of intervention that we can give right now. What needs to be done is actually we need to expand our export capacity and in turn the exports. We need to increase our domestic output. Also, that is going to generate employment. Now, coupling all of these together, what we are going to get is the economic growth. There has been a constant gap in the exports and the imports of Pakistan, around 7%. ये difference हमेशा रहा है since 2007. That again points towards the bleak picture that we have been living with since this time. What needs to be done here? We need market-determined exchange rate policy. So, we are talking about the forces of market over here, that they should be the deciding principle for the exchange rate policies. The conducive policy environment, very important. All the students of public policy here would realize that public policy without such an environment would not be implemented properly. Cannot be rather implemented properly, and we need some structural reforms to incentivize our business owners, our exporters to get more economic output, more economic growth in Pakistan. And to monitor that, the government should have a dashboard set up whereby we can monitor the report. For example, it happened in the case of COVID, where NCOC created dashboards in everything that happened under the surveillance and the treatment of COVID was being reflected to the government and to the public as well. So उसी तरह का कुछ हमें economic sphere में भी करना पड़ेगा, but with the supervision of the government. Next slide, please. The socio-economic backwardness that we are facing. So since the last 75 years, politically and economically, we are in a very topsy-turvy state. We have never been able to rise above the inability to develop our institutions. I hope you remember what the Vice Chairman BIP just said, that we are focused upon building institutions that are operational on a sustainable paradigm. Unfortunately, things have not been, this has not been the case in Pakistan, but we are focused upon that. Why it has been difficult? Because we are still very much dependent on the history and the path dependence theory, jiska मालूम होगा आप लोगों को, all the economics graduates people might know about this, that we feel that external flows are based on geo-economics, geostrategic and geo-economic choices of Pakistan. We are neglecting our natural resources, the endowment that we have been given in Pakistan naturally, and the government dysfunction make it very, very difficult for us to have a very sustainable institutional paradigm. Path dependence का लेकिन थोड़ा सा elaborate. Path dependence इसमें ये मुराद है that we are just treading the same path that we have been treading for a long time since past. Now the vision, the output needs to be changed, which cannot be changed without changing the strategy. Ek or thing that we do that is kind of criminal when we understand, when we already know that our economy needs more hands to create output rather than more mouths to be fed. We are having a criminal neglect of women empowerment. That needs to be rectified. How can this be done? First of all, nothing can be achieved without a conducive policy environment, which cannot be achieved without a stable political environment. Then we need to shun the ideas of path dependency. We must, it's need of the hour to pursue the endowment-based growth framework. वो किस तरह? We have plethora of natural resources. We have a very fertile Balochistan. We have a very in terms of natural resources. We have a very fertile other 3 provinces. So why don't we extract, exploit, and tap on those potentials for us to make economic leaps? We need to raise our domestic resources. We need better public management. Apart from the public financial management. And women empowerment cannot take place without investing in our social sectors. For example, education, healthcare, access to law and justice, access to finance and markets, and education and unko jo chahiye trainings in terms of their capacity building has to be done with the hand-holding of private and public sectors both. So I also talked about the gender deficit, जो मैंने आप लोगों को themes में शायद discuss किया होगा. We also talked about that. In that chapter, we made a comparative analysis of different sectors, and we also took some help from the internationally renowned indices and statistics figures that told us where do we stand as a country in terms of empowering our women. Unfortunately, we are ahead of only Afghanistan. I'm sorry, I'm smiling while I say this, but you know, sometimes you smile out of embarrassment, and that's my case over here. What we see in those reports is that peace and security, development and progression, everything cannot be achieved without having a legal and regulatory and policy framework that supports women empowerment, number one. Number two, the global gender gap, it is a abridged version, जिसमें उन्होंने सारी countries का, they took an accumulative 132-year analysis, and they said, Pakistan has been at 68.1%, it has been able to just achieve it. So still we are behind by around by 30 points. Pakistan is only ahead of Afghanistan, as I've already told you. And now the local version, the Gender Gap Index of Pakistan, has stated that in Pakistan, the economic participation of women stands at 145 out of 146. So you can automatically imagine कि 140, you can guess कि 146th country कौन सी होगी? Afghanistan, अगर हम उससे सिर्फ एक index ऊपर हैं तो. Then health and survival, when we talk about that, as sir has already mentioned, we stand at 143 out of 146 countries, and at educational attainment, we are at 135 out of 146 countries. The recommendations to rectify these problems are that we need to have and we need to promote women-friendly culture for law enforcement, and through these legal and regulatory frameworks, number one. Number two, we need to think in a very visionary manner, in a very strategic manner. Usme policy, planning, strategic investment, sab kuch aa jata hai. We need resource allocation for gender-sensitive planning, gender-sensitive budgeting, gender-sensitive resource endowments and allocation. We need to have gender-based planning budgets, GBPB जो मैंने लिखा है वो ये है, which aims to have financial inclusion for women, to create safety nets for women, and to develop their capabilities in order to foster economic growth. Secondly, there's a need for access to education, health, etc. Universal health and universal education, inki provision cannot be ignored. Then we need to invest in advocacy, public awareness messages and campaigns in order to make women empowerment more easy and more accessible for everyone. We also need to create gender parity district intervention models. Now, the students of public policy and public administration and governance would know about this already, that local government se jo growth hoti hai, that is more sustainable because each one of us, that means, is on the same page. Hence, to create parity in terms of gender, we need to do that from the lowest levels. Such models should be created for interventions. Then we should establish women-friendly culture and cities, WFC. How can that be done? It can be done through local equality action plans. This, again, would be a framework that has to be given by the policymakers, the governance practitioners, and the public administrators. One other thing I would like to add over here is that we also need to, all of us must be aware of the SDGs. We need to localize the SDGs in our local contexts. Okay. Women and climate change. Okay, dealing with the women and climate change, the menace of climate change, we see that women are also bearing the brunt of that problem. How now? First of all, we need to understand that climate change ki wajah se, what are the impacts that have been induced within Pakistan? Number one, there has been a loss of income and property. For example, the floods that we had in year 2022, the floods that we've had before that, and God forbid, the natural disasters and calamities we may have in the future. Secondly, there has been a widened inequality. There has also been a decrease, a diminution of access to health and education for everyone, but women in particular suffer the most. The areas where improvement are needed in this sector is that we must create a direct income support and cash transfer program. For example, जिस तरह BESP है हमारे पास, उसके अलावा private and public sector की collaboration के साथ we can do more, and we can also somehow raise the amount. We need expanded family and child benefits for vulnerable women. Support for women-owned businesses is a must. We need to create an entrepreneurial spirit. We need to create a sense of risk-taking and rising above the challenges in our women through giving them access to finance and markets, and through giving them entrepreneurial education and digitizing, giving them digital literacy. With a large proportion of women workers and grant subsidies loans, we've discussed that. We also need to implement gender-responsive social protection programs. All the students of social welfare, for example, or social protection programs, they understand social work जो हमारा होता है, it is incomplete without trying to create a betterment in the lives of the client. There's a very important concept over here. We need to bridge the gap between the gender pays, you know. So people, the students of gender studies would know that this is one of the key areas where parity needs to be created. %70 of 1.5 billion poor women have been affected by climate change. Women are 14 times more vulnerable to die in terms of in the wake of such calamities, 4 times more likely to be displaced because of climate change. And in the next 25 years, the surface water would decrease. These are the statistics that tell you the damages and the problem repercussions of climate change. However, sadly, we have to point it out, and we have in the annual report, that there's a very limited understanding, even now, even today, there is a very limited understanding of climate change in Pakistan. There are, because of which hydrology and glacier behaviors are not understood. Now, when they are not understood, that means we cannot act proactively. And because of that, we also see that there's a salt balance issue in the Indus Basin. Now, if such issues keep on haunting us, how are we going to save our water, save our resources, and in turn, save our women and our people of the country? Although everyone needs to be saved, since this report is very women-centric, hence I have to say that, you know, how to save women. We recommend that policy focus should be on increasing the resilience of women. How can that be done? Education होगी, health होगी, technology होगी, इन सारी चीज़ों के साथ legal frameworks उनकी favor में बनाए जाएं. We need to reduce the maternal mortality from 186 to 20. This has happened or has been the practice of the countries who have progressed in the past. We need to create safety nets, as we've already talked about, say, social security programs. We need to adapt the policies, adaptation of the policies, evaluation of options with 50 years perspective on water, because water is such a valuable resource, priceless resource. So we have to think 50 years ahead at the least. According to the agriculture, the Department of Agriculture, Punjab, we have seen that 70% of the labor force in agriculture is usually women. Their labor power is also, although considered inferior. Why? That is because of generally the patriarchal nature of the society. There has been a traditional participation their traditional participation is in value chain nodes with lower economic returns. Why? Because they are just not trusted with higher value added or value generating employment nodes. They also face the restriction on land ownerships. We recommend that women must be associated in the policy, institutional, and programmatic planning process levels. Simply put, we need a very women-friendly environment where we can implement their inheritance laws, and we can provide them microfinance, and we can help them have employment opportunities for themselves. They are water use visionaries, keep that in mind, so their input should also be taken when we are thinking of conserving water for the next 50 years, and we should be involving them in the decision-making processes. There should be no discrimination in the wages, and they should be given support at the provincial levels. Quickly, we can talk about the women's role in China's development. Success कैसे आया China में? Through 2 things. Number 1, China prohibited women's foot binding in the past, which enabled them to make greater leaps economically and to get out of their houses, join the factories, and get more economic growth for not only for their families, but for the countries as well. Secondly, they were given technological information, training. They were given digital and literacy as well. That is why so many of their women are working in science and technology as well. Women in research, unki 33% thi, etc. And AI may, surprisingly, considering if we compare them with Pakistan, AI they were 22% and they are increasing. Why? It happened because there was an elimination of legal barriers in their country. Higher education standards उनको दिए गए, and plus research and development and STEM education was also provided to them. Women, please आगे जल्दी से कर दें. Women in science and development में, there are some areas where women can contribute very easily because they are endowed with that intellectual power as well. Those areas are digital technology, data analytics, blockchain, biotechnology, and computer sciences in today's world. आज की बात कर रहे हैं हम. So public policy areas जिन पे focus करना चाहिए in respect to this fact is information technology and small and medium enterprises, because women can also play a part in these, and also they can contribute in gain from these areas. Empowering women through vote. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very interesting piece of work. Isme, we have found that women have traditionally faced a lack of voice in Pakistan, like any other developing country. So, in order to work on that, we thought that there should be a repositioning of power. They should be given accountability, but after, they should be having a power to make others accountable after they have casted their votes. So, reposition power through inclusive electoral roles. Unregistered voters आज भी 12 million है पाकिस्तान में, ख़वातीन में देखा जाए. And out of these, around 40% women did not cast any vote in the general elections of 2018, the previous one. Why has this happened? Again, institutions की जो इसमें problem है वो दोबारा हमें नजर आती है. Failure of state institutions, Nadra and Election Commission. Secondly, culpability of political parties, that they do not make it feasible for women sometimes to go and cast their votes. Uske ilawa, when we are not looking into that, we are being criminal in the eyes of international law as well. How? We have ratified, we have made our signatures in CEDAW. Article 7 uska kya kehta hai? We are violating it. उस इंटरनेशनल कवनेंट ऑफ सिविल एंड पॉलिटिकल राइट्स का आर्टिकल 3 क्या कहता है? वो यही कहता है कि women should be included in the political processes. We are violating it. So again, in the eyes of international law, that's criminal. Gender inclusive political parties honi chahiye. That is going to foster the vote of women in Pakistan. And with this, we have come to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much.
I expect students to be raising questions. So we have now a presentation, despite the technical hitch, by Ayman. Well done, Ayman. A very comprehensive presentation. So start making notes that you will be asking questions at the end of Shahid Javed Burki's presentation. Not just this report, but also Shahid Javed Burki's presentation on his book.
Before inviting Mr. Shahid Javed Burki, I would like to say that Pakistan's situation is such that we are earning less and spending more. Last year, our exports were around $32 billion, while imports were $80 billion. There was a gap of $48 billion. Fortunately, in last 20 years, we exported youth, and due to that youth, our remittances, which were in 2007 were in $1 billion, and last year raised to $31 billion. Even then, the gap was there. The second issue is that in FBR, we have around 37,000 employees, while our tax collection rate is the lowest in the region. Especially our business community, traders specifically, are not paying tax. Nearby is anarchically, no one is paying tax. That is a major issue. So tax collection, we have to raise the tax collection so that, and we have to reduce our spending. Especially at government level, spending must be reduced so that this gap can be reduced. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Shahid Javed Burki, alumni of Government College University. He was here from 1955 to 1959, and he did master in physics at that time. Later on, he did PhD in economics, and he was in World Bank, and he retired from World Bank as vice president, 26 years of service, and specifically he worked in China for 8 years. Whatever China is today, that is contribution of Mr. Shahid Javed Burki. So I invite Mr. Shahid Javed Burki for talk on Pakistan's economic crisis and way forward. And also he will talk about his latest book, 75 Years of Pakistan. Mr. Shahid Javed Burki.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, Ms. Shahid Najam, the audience. Looking at the program, I was scheduled to speak for 35-40 minutes, but a lot of what I was going to say has already been said by my colleague. So I will cut short my presentation in order to have a bit of an exchange with you, questions and answers and comments and so on and so forth. There are 2 or 3 points I want to make. One is, since I live abroad, I left Pakistan almost 60 years ago. I traveled back to Pakistan off and on. There is one thing I've noticed that has changed in the last few years is loss of confidence in the country's future. Not only that, we indulge in a lot of negative talk about Pakistan and where it is likely to go. I have, although as I said, I live abroad, I have kept my roots in Pakistan, and I've written extensively about Pakistan. I published something like 6 books on the country, and I have not lost faith in the creation of Pakistan as a way of solving the problem of what were then the Indian Muslims in the British colony. I've not lost faith in Pakistan's future. I remain positive, I remain optimistic. Just let me go over a conversation I had with Mr. L.K. Advani, who was Deputy Prime Minister of India when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. I was introduced to him by a colleague of mine from the World Bank. And when I went to see him, he said to me, Mr. Burki, I have kept 2 hours for you, and there's a lot to talk about. But I have an enormous amount of interest in Pakistan. He said, I don't know if you know that I was born in Pakistan. So I said to him, I know you were born in Hyderabad and then you moved to what is India now. He said, I just want to make one comment which will probably make you uneasy. The comment is that we Indians love India. You Pakistanis don't like Pakistan. Now that shook me. And I said, why have you come to that conclusion? He said, I read a lot about Pakistan. I'm familiar with what you have written. You are one of the very few Pakistanis writing about Pakistan who remains positive. There is an enormous amount of negative talk by Pakistanis about their own country. He said, I'm not saying that we Indians don't quarrel among ourselves. We have a lot of differences. You are a frequent visitor to India. You see our newspapers and so on, full of disputes, full of disagreements and so on. However, when we go abroad or when we meet with foreigners, we speak with one voice. That is the Indian voice. And we want that voice to be heard outside the country. You people don't do that. And then he said, I have tested this with people such as you who visit me from Pakistan or originally from Pakistan. And I test this feeling by saying something slightly negative about their country. And in response, they go 10 yards ahead of me and giving me even more reasons why I should be negative. He said, that's not a good thing. It is not a good thing because the world is changing very rapidly and the world is becoming integrated and people take notice of what people say about their own country and act accordingly. And if you persist in this, uh, there will be loss of interest in Pakistan and Pakistan will suffer as a result. So that's uh, relating one conversation I had with a very senior Indian leader and so on. Ayman has already presented in great detail our findings in the report uh, that we published a few months ago. Uh, in addition, uh, I would just like to take a few minutes and talk about this book, which came out a couple of months ago, published by Oxford. It's called Pakistan, Statecraft and Geopolitics in Today's World. The theme of the book is we live in a very difficult physical environment. We have four neighbors: Afghanistan, China, India, and Iran. With the exception of China, the other three have serious problems of their own. And these problems are going to have an effect on Pakistan. I don't have to dwell in detail about the kind of problems that Afghanistan is faced with, or what's happening in Iran and the way the clerics in that country are working and establishing a new, not so new anymore, political system. Now, India also has problems, but very few people talk about them and very few people take notice of those. I don't know if you read Express Tribune, the newspaper that comes out from Karachi, and it is a kind of, it is associated with the New York Times. I have an article in that today in which I talk about weaknesses of India, which Indians themselves will not be talking about. The week before, I wrote about what I call the Adani episode. I don't know how many of you have followed what happened to Gautam Adani, at one point identified as the second or third richest man in the world. And then there is a small outfit based in New York that published a report on Adani and said a lot of his wealth was based on fraud and misstatements. And that resulted in the collapse of this man's system, as well as a serious erosion of his wealth. And it has had an impact on India because a lot of banks, Indian banks, had invested in him. The point I'm making is that at this point, we have to begin to focus on the positive, develop some kind of a confidence in our future, and understand what our present is. I'm not saying that we should be irresponsibly patriotic. We should recognize the problems, but we should also recognize the strengths that this country has. Let me just point out a few things that I develop at some length in this book's final chapters. One, the Pakistani population. Nobody expected that Pakistan will have 220 million people in the year 2017 when the last census was taken. There was general assumption that the rate of growth of the population would be around 1.8%. It turned out to be 2.4%. This is one of the most rapidly growing populations in the world. Because it is growing rapidly, it is also a very young population. It is one of the youngest populations in the world. Something like 50% of Pakistani population is below the age of 24. So Pakistan has 120 million, 110 million youth. These people can be turned into a tremendous asset if the government and the political people who are currently in power or will be in power in the future recognize the contribution the youth can make. The second thing that I find positive about Pakistan is Pakistan's location. You look at the map and you will obviously notice that we sit right on top of India. If India wants to access, say, Afghanistan or go by road to China, even the Middle East and so on, it must use Pakistan as a space of transition. So commerce, international commerce, could become a major contributor to our social change, our economic progress, and our better integration into the world. Just to mention one thing, the other day when I went to my bank in Washington and I said, I want X amount of dollars, but the money that you give me should be new because the country that I am going to, their people don't accept old currency notes. So she said to me, where are you going? So I said, I'm going to Pakistan. She said, oh my God. I mean, that reaction from an ordinary bank clerk bothered me. This is not a reaction that I want to see people coming up with as a response when you say, I am originally from Pakistan, I'm going to Pakistan, and so on and so forth. This we need to change. How? Well, obviously by educating ourselves, by thinking differently about ourselves, by recognizing that our future is bright, not as bad as newspapers every day talk about, and so forth. I think somebody mentioned that I was at the World Bank for a very long time, for 26 years. And of these, I spent 8 years as the director of World Bank's operations in China. And I got to know the Chinese leadership very well. And one day, the Chinese Prime Minister, as I was leaving for a new job in the bank, he said to me, could you come to my room for a minute? I want to talk to you. His name is Tu Rongchi. He's still alive. He's an old man now. And he spoke a little bit of English, which meant that I didn't need any interpretation. So anyhow, he took me to his room. And Chinese normally don't do that because their rooms are very modest. They are small, but their conference rooms are very, very large and very lavishly furnished and so on. So he took me to his room, and there was a map of China. And he said to me, look at the map. Strange, isn't it? So I had no idea what he was talking about. So I said to him, Mr. Prime Minister, explain to me why you think the map is strange. He said, we are the only large geographic space in the world which is landlocked on three sides: north, east, and south. We are open only on the east. And he said, you have worked on China long enough to know that our east is very crowded. But so we must now move people from the east to the west. And that means in the areas that border Pakistan. And I have been trying to interest Pakistan in the fact that China is changing, and China could use Pakistan as a way of making the transition, demographic transition that he was talking about. He said, despite a lot of effort, I have not had any positive response from the country. So this is just one indication of why our policymakers need to understand who we are, where we are, and where we could go. And if we do that, I can assure you that Pakistan has a very good future. She has already talked about the role that women could play. I have often said this, and I have said this in gatherings such as this, where women were visibly present in large numbers. My feeling is that Pakistani women are better than Pakistani men. And when I say this, I get the same response from women, clapping. But this is a fact. I find, okay, let me just go back to my personal history. I worked, a very good friend of mine became the Vice Chancellor of Beacon House National University. His name is Sartaj Aziz. He is now an old man, 94 years old, but still very vigorous and so on. So he asked me to lecture to his students off and on whenever I was in Pakistan on the kind of thing that I'm talking about, Pakistan's economic history, its present, its future, and so on. So and I said to Sartaj Aziz that, okay, I will do that. Each lecture will be 2 hours long, and I'll speak for about 40 minutes, and the rest will be a conversation. So the first one that I went to the room, and I noticed that it was full of girls, very few boys. So the girl who was sitting next to the door, I said to her, could you please lock the door? So she locked the door. After 10 minutes, there was banging on the door. So I went to the door and I opened the door, and there were about 10 boys standing outside. I said, I'm afraid you are 10 minutes late and you are not going to come in. So they were very surprised, so I locked the door, and then I spoke mostly to a group that was about 90% girls and 10% boys. The next time I went there, the message has gone around that this fellow is a nasty piece of work. If we really want to listen to him, we have to be on time. So people came. Then when I started talking, I saw one guy sitting over there yawn. Then the second fellow next to him yawned. Third guy yawned, opened big mouth. So I said to them, am I very boring? Am I putting you to sleep? They said, no, sir, you are not. What has happened to 6, 7 of us was that we played band at a wedding all night. And we are now very sleepy. But we were told that you don't tolerate people coming in late, so we came but we are finding it very difficult to keep our eyes open. So essentially what I'm saying is that the young Pakistani men are involved in things other than, learning and so on and so forth. So it is important for men to make sure that they are not permanently overtaken by women who are serious, hardworking, interested in their present and their future, and are prepared to work for it. And that's something that the Pakistani youth must do. I'll I'll conclude by saying that since my name is Burki, you probably understand that I am related to Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister. And I was having a conversation with him a few days ago, and I said to him, what is your assessment of Pakistan's future? So he calls me Shahid Bhai. He said, Shahid Bhai, I'm very positive, but I am at the same time very troubled by the way the political system is evolving in this country. So I said to him, don't be negative. Look at it positive. I said, do you realize that there are 51 Muslim countries in the world? Of these 51, there are just 3 that are moving towards some kind of representative democracy: Pakistan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So there are a lot of problems, there are a lot of back and forth on this. Today's paper has news about Imran Khan and Maryam Sharif calling each other names and so on and so forth. The point is that despite all this, we are moving in the right direction: representative democracy, vigorous political system, and so on. And as she pointed out in her presentation, political stability is one of the preconditions for moving forward. So the youth of the country, some political development, the location of the country, and the fact that if we change the culture of this country and make people think positive, we have a great future ahead of us. So thank you very much, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
We are so proud that Mr. Shahid Javed Burki Saab has been an old Ravian a few years before I was even born, when he was a student here. So, and the work that he has done, not just in public service here, but also at World Bank, but most amazingly, he has written extensively about Pakistan. So go look for the books: Pakistan under Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Pakistan under military leadership, Pakistan after 50 years of nationhood. So there's a whole series of reflections at different time on Pakistan. So we are so very proud of you and very grateful that you could spare time today to be amongst us. And this is our drive that in which we want to open up the possibilities for our students to learn beyond the classroom, because we believe that classroom, a given curriculum, is not all that these youngsters need, especially for the positive future that you and also Shahid Najam very briefly touched upon is dependent upon them. So very often we rely on this kind of learning beyond the classroom and interaction between the keynote speaker and the students. And it has taken us a little effort to actually train our students to start asking questions, because again, the typical...
Could I just add one more thing? This is the second time I've spoken in this hall. The first time was, I think, 5, 6 years ago, and the hall was more full than it is today. And the Vice Chancellor was Aftab.
Khalid Aftab Saab ji.
And after I had given the speech, he said to the students that I have invited Mr. Burki for a cup of coffee with some members of the staff. So my suggestion is that you self-select 12 students and attend that coffee party that he had arranged. And so as we were walking back to his office, I said, that was a great idea. And 5 minutes later, 12 students came, all women, not a single, not a single man in that group. So again, another proof that Pakistani men, before you are left behind permanently.
How important it is that we create that environment where women had equal opportunity for their economic contribution, for their social, cultural, all kinds of contributions. And we are very, very proud that only a year ago we set up Women Development Center. And Sumaira Khalil, who's in charge of Women Development Center, she is leading, and not a day goes by when we don't have very hands-on training, workshop, discussion in which we are empowering our women. And one of the terms we use, making them more resilient women for the future leadership. So in that respect, Government College is playing its role, and especially having established Women Development Center. We are doing this hands-on. We may not we are a smallish university in Pakistan standards, but we are doing our bit. The second bit, for the first time in almost 160 years of history of Government College, last year, or 2021 to be exact, for the first time we gave admission to women on sports basis. Never before. We were forming teams for girls, but never before we actually gave them admission on sports basis. And the same year, we started keeping record of their achievements. So for instance, we had 100-meter run for boys as well as girls, and we had record of, in 1950s or 1960s, that boy ran 100-meter with that time. But girls did run, but nobody kept record of what time. So only in 2021, we started now retaining the records, and now every year there will be records broken, very quickly broken, and girls are forever so excited to participate in sports, and sports as well as extracurricular activities. Only after I have arrived, many girls have actually become the president of our student societies. Prior to that, it was almost entirely males. So we are doing that. And if you come to convocation, and in fact, only this morning we decided our 21st convocation will be taking place on 16th of March. And when we announce the roll of honor or the gold medal for the first position, you would be surprised to see one boy in that queue, long queue of people coming to receive their toppers awards. So in that respect, girls are doing very well in Government College, and we are very proud of it. And we see this is a general trend that boys are left behind, certainly in academic pursuits, the girls are. So we still have to, through your work and other way, find out why girls doing so well in academia don't make it to contribute so well in economy. So this was my address, which was put in the program. I just want to take this opportunity to invite you again And here we have two sets of questions. And in both cases, we will be asking Shahid Javed Burki to first have a response, and then others. And Iman, if you don't mind, please come and join them on the panel here so that you could also respond to the questions.
सर आपने जो दो आर्टिकल्स
ट्राइब्यून भी करा दीजिए.
सर मेरा नाम मोहम्मद अजान उमर है और मैं डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल साइंस में 6 सेमेस्टर का स्टूडेंट हूँ. सर आपने जो ट्राइब्यून में दोनों आर्टिकल्स लिखे थे अडानी ग्रुप के बारे में, वो मैंने दोनों रीड किए. सर मेरा सवाल ये है कि अडानी ग्रुप में आपने मेंशन किया कि किस तरह वो स्टॉक स्पेकुलेटेड थे और विद इन 5 ईयर्स अडानी जो है वर्ल्ड रिचेस्ट मैन बन गया, और उसके बाद हिंडनबर्ग की एक रिपोर्ट आती है जो कि शॉर्ट सेलर कंपनी है, और उसके बाद वो फॉल डाउन. और आपने उसमें मेंशन भी किया कि किस तरह मोदी और अडानी के आपस में कोलैबोरेशंस के साथ वो इन्वेस्टमेंट आई. द सेम इज़ द केस विद पाकिस्तान, लेकिन यहाँ पे बहुत डिफरेंट है कि यहाँ पे स्टेट बैक्ड रियल स्टेट इन्वेस्टमेंट है, हमारे पास DHAs और अस्करी हैं. वहाँ पे सर एक तरह से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट है जो कि अडानी ग्रुप करता है. तो सर सवाल ये है कि क्या आपको लगता है कि पाकिस्तान में जो रियल स्टेट इन्वेस्टमेंट है वो भी एक तरह से स्पेकुलेटेड मार्केट है, उसमें कुछ भी प्रोडक्टिव नहीं है, तो क्या जो रियल स्टेट बूम है वो भी एक दिन बस्ट होगा जिस तरह के अडानी का जो बूम है वो बस्ट हुआ?
I think that's a very good question, and I have studied what's happening to the rate of savings in Pakistan. Ayman was pointing out that we need to create the capacity to save as well as invest ourselves rather than depend on foreign flows. There was a study done a couple of years ago, according to which the money that is saved by industrial people or business people is invested mostly in real estate. It is not invested in productive activities. And the reason is that the rate of return on real estate is very high. And so there is no reason why those who have the money, those who are making good returns from whatever businesses they are doing, they would invest in productive activities. How do you solve that problem? There is the same solution to a number of these problems, which is to use the tax system. Use the fiscal system to discourage investment in real estate and to very heavily tax the profits that people make in real estate. I will just give you two experiences, personal experiences. When I was at the World Bank, our salaries were tax-free. When I left the World Bank and decided to stay on in the United States, there were a bunch of us and about 20 people who were doing the same thing, foreigners who were not going to go home. And the World Bank management invited a tax lawyer to speak to us. So this guy came and he said to us that before I explain how the Internal Revenue Service called IRS in the United States works, I just want to give you something that you must remember. The moment you step out of the World Bank building, whenever you retire, you are subject to being watched by IRS. IRS is an institution that is merciless. If you play around with your taxes or if you misreport your income, etc., IRS will go after you. And they will take everything you have, possibly even your wife. So that's the kind of fear people with successful fiscal systems have in the world. Over here, nobody bothers what will happen if they avoid paying taxes. My wife one day when we were visiting, went to a store in Islamabad's main shopping area, and she was buying shawls in order to present them to people in the United States. And I was with her, so I noticed that her shopping, the amount that she was spending was growing and growing and growing. So there's a store called Maharaja in the main shopping area of Islamabad. So the owner his name is Maharaja. He is a Hindu from Sindh. So I turned to Maharaja and I said, Maharaja, my wife is going to spend lakhs on her purchases. Make sure that the receipt that you give me is a pakka receipt. So he said to me, sir, I will give you a super pakka receipt, but do you think I'm going to pay tax on that? Swal hi nahi paida hota. He said, go around shops over here, ask them, does anybody pay any tax? No. So you can't do this. You cannot have such a weak fiscal system if you want to really have both that and people make the right kind of investments. So my answer to your question is that one thing that we need to do to make sure that Adani does not appear in Pakistan is to see to it that incomes that are generated by real estate are properly taxed. I had a very good friend who was at the World Bank. He was the son of a very senior Pakistani civil servant by the name of Aziz Ahmed. Aziz Ahmed and then became foreign minister. So this guy came to Pakistan and he told me, he said, you know, I was really embarrassed when I was in Pakistan. And I said, what happened? He said, my father built a large house in Islamabad. And when I was there, the house has been lying vacant. We have not rented it. I got a tax bill. And he said, I couldn't believe it, that a house of that size, the tax bill was 18,000 rupees. That's it. So, you know, we need to really rework the tax system. We really need to make sure that people are afraid if they avoid putting in the right kind of documents that are needed. And our fiscal system really needs to be reformed. What happened to Adani was not that he was investing in real estate. What happened to him was that he was a close associate of Narendra Modi. Both are from Gujarat. And Narendra Modi was giving him opportunities that other people didn't have. So he invested very heavily in coal mines. He built a couple of ports. He had 2 or 3 steel mills that were based on burning of coal. Then he bought an open surface coal mine in Australia. So his income was not generated by real estate. His income was generated by being very close to the powers that be in India.
Thank you. Thank you. Yahan dijiye ji.
In Center at Government College. My question and comment is related to the report that we just heard to, and the name that I see of the report is very ironic because it is State of the Economy, Frontline Stakeholders Reaping the Gender Dividend. Aren't these the people who are supposed to bridging this gap instead of reaping it? And also, we, in the capacity of being a part of Women Development Center and Women Development Department Punjab, have worked a lot towards these kind of reports. Like we worked for the gender parity report as well. We collected data and everything. My question is that the data is there, and every time when the report is made, there is a decrease in the number of women on leadership positions. But when you come to academics, as Zaidi Saab has also pointed out, the ratio of women leading at academics is much, much more than men. Why don't we see that in the world outside, in careers, in other positions? And also, who is actually going to bridge this gap? Who's going to bell the cat? Policy is there, but who's going to implement it? Who are the stakeholders that we are talking about here?
Excellent question. Thank you.
My answer is that one of the problems I notice in Pakistan is that people don't read. Civil servants don't read at all. I was in the civil service for a few years. I was a compulsive reader and a compulsive writer, but I was pretty unique. We produce reports, and I can tell you they don't get read. I had an interesting example of this a few months ago. A very senior Pakistani political person whom I know very well. He was, I don't want to say any more because you'll probably be able to guess his name. He went to the United States and the ambassador in Washington threw a small dinner for him. And since he has known me for a long time, he said to me, I'm having discussions with the government of the United States to say, what is it that they could do for Pakistan? So do you have any idea that I should be focusing on? I said, sure. If I were you, I would press very hard on American assistance for preventing serious damage to Pakistan because of global warming. So he said to me, global warming? What has Pakistan got to do with this? He said, this is their problem. We have not. I said, you're not serious, are you? And I said, the World Bank did a report 3 years ago in which it identified Pakistan as one of the most seriously affected country because of global warming. And I said, you know what's going to happen according to the World Bank? What's going to happen is that glaciers in the Himalayas and Hindu Kush are going to melt at a faster rate than has happened in the past. Consequently, there will be floods. There will be more rain because rain is caused by evaporation. And once 10, 15, 20 years from now, the thickness of ice declines, the flow of water into the rivers will be seriously reduced. And according to the bank, unless Pakistan does something about this, it will become a desert rather than well-nourished agriculture sector. And he had no idea that the bank had done this report. What the World Bank has suggested was that this period of about 10, 15 years when the flow of water, and we saw this happen in the summer of last year when there were floods and so on, that Pakistan should build 12 storages. And it called this report 12 cascades. And the idea was that the water that is going to go into the sea untapped will be stored in these lakes that will be created, so that when the water flow reduces, at least Pakistan has saved some of what is going to be lost. Nobody has read that report, let alone acted on it. So essentially, I was talking about my conversation with Imran. He doesn't read either. I think our policymakers, I don't know how to persuade these people that they should read what the world is writing about Pakistan and then act upon these things. We produce reports. I can take a bet that no more than half a dozen people in the Secretariat would have read this. Would you agree with me?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sajjad Ali Shah. I'm a student of political science. First of all, the discussion was really wise. Thank you for that. So my question is that as a youth, we have seen that there is a kind of hopelessness as we look into the future just because of jobs, securities, and lack of opportunities. So I just want to ask that, what is the hesitation that we are progressing very slow as a nation? What is that hesitation? Is it just because of that economic constraints or other factors affecting it as well? Thank you.
So what is the hesitation about what?
Progressing slow as a nation.
I have a
Prosperity.
chapter in this report which provides an answer to that question. Why Pakistani growth rate has not been as high as Pakistan's potential indicates it could be. But there are 2 or 3 reasons for this, and I'll mention them very briefly. The one that I've already talked about is our savings rate and our ability to, whatever we save, to put it in the right sectors of the economy. I had an interesting conversation with the late General Musharraf when he was the President of Pakistan. Then I was writing a book on the Musharraf period, and I had interviewed him several times. And it was February or March of 2006 that I went to see him again, and he said to me, Burki Saab, aapki kitab meri kitab se pehle aa rahi hai? He was then working on his memoirs, which came out as In the Line of Fire. So I told him, I said, Mr. President, my book is not going to come out soon. He said, really? Somebody told me that you had finished the manuscript. I said, I have finished the manuscript. When I wrote it, I was much positive about what you were doing. I am less so now. Presidents don't like to be told that their performance is below par. He was shocked. He said to me, but you are an economist, you're not a political scientist. In terms of the economy, we are doing very well. I said, no, you are not. And I said, when I switched to economics from physics at Oxford, my teacher was a guy called Sir Roy Harrod. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Harrod-Domar model.
Yes, growth model.
And I explained to him, I said, this man had a very simple model to estimate the sustainable rate of growth, which was you divide the rate of investment by something called incremental capital output ratio, which serious economists calculate for almost every country. I said, you are saving around 14% of GDP. Your I-core is 3.5, I think. You divide 14 by 3.5, you get a rate of growth of 4%. You are going around saying that you've achieved a rate of growth of 7 to 8%, and your Prime Minister, Shaukat Aziz, is saying the same thing. You are wrong. You have not. Your rate of growth will only increase if you increase the rate of savings or you reduce I-core. I-core depends on the efficiency of the economy, and Pakistan is not a very efficient economy. So he understood that, and then he called Shaukat Aziz and said, this is what Burki came to see me and said to me. So then Shaukat Aziz called me, and he said to me, ये आप क्या अनशंट बातें कर रहे हैं मुशर्रफ के साथ, वो बड़ा परेशान हो गया. This guy had never thought of, he had very little knowledge of economics, Shaukat Aziz, and he had never thought of these kinds of things. So in order to increase the rate of growth, 3 things are absolutely essential. One is to increase our savings rate and put it in the right kind of investments. 14% is not enough. We need to go to 20, 22%. Improve the efficiency of the economy. Second, we need to recognize that we must educate our youth and give them the training that the world needs. At this point, there is a lot of demand in China, for instance, for information technology young people, because China is a very rapidly aging society. And the third thing is that we should make use of what I call land-based commerce. Chinese are now investing in CPEC-related infrastructure. We should extend it to Afghanistan and to the Central Asia. In the article that I have in today's Tribune, I say that if we do that, Gwadar will become one of the finest ports in all of Asia. So these are the kinds of things that need to be done.
Thank you.